did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, down to a sunless sea. Like most critics of Coleridge's time, William Hazlitt took a rather dim view of Kubla Khan. Writing in The Examiner on June 2nd, 1816, he said, "The poem only shows that Mr. Coleridge can write better nonsense verses than any man in England," adding, "It is not a poem, but a musical composition." Citing the opening lines of the third stanza as an example, he says, "We could repeat these lines to ourselves, not the less often, for not knowing the meaning of them." And that, perhaps, is the point. Whatever Kubla Khan means, if it means anything at all, it sounds great. So, let's begin by looking at the way the poet uses sound. The opening line, borrowed from Purchas's Pilgrims, gains an extra syllable, turning Zamdu to Xanadu to create an iambic tetrameter. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan, did-dum, 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 did-dum. And there's an intricate balance of sounds in this line, giving it a wonderful resonance. This is perhaps best illustrated by picking out the vowel sounds. I, a, u, a. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan. Zan is balanced by Khan, and the alliterative d and k sounds, the assonance of I in and did, and a and u in Xanadu and Kubla Khan, all work together to create a powerful effect. An effect that continues into the second line as Coleridge inverts the verb-object word order of his source text, substituting pleasure dome for palace and decree for build, once again creating a powerful iambic tetrameter. A stately pleasure dome decree. The alliterative d sound punctuates the final iamb, picking up on the second iamb of the first line, and we've got little echoes going on with Kubla and pleasure and stately and decree. And that's just the first two lines. I won't be going into the whole poem in such detail, but it should be clear that with so much going on in terms of rhyme, rhythm, assonance and alliteration, it's not surprising the end result is something of a feast for the ear. In the third line, Alf, the sacred river, picks up on the a sounds of Xanadu and Kubla Khan, and the rhyme with ran reinforces Khan in the first line. I'm not certain whether Khan and ran would have been pronounced with R and A respectively in Coleridge's day, but I don't think it matters much, especially since ran is an exact rhyme with man in the following line, giving a strong sense of structure and flow to the third and fourth lines, reinforcing the flow of the river itself. The opening sentence of the poem resolves with a shorter line, a trimeter rather than a tetrameter, down to a sunless sea, or perhaps better with an inverted first foot, down to a sunless sea. Just as the river itself comes to an end, brought up short by the sunless sea. Again, Coleridge depends heavily on alliteration in these three lines. River ran, enhancing the sense of the river flowing, measureless to man, conveying a sense of the immensity of the caverns, and culminating in the sibilant S sounds of the sunless sea into which the river flows. The fact that the caverns are measureless while the sea is sunless creates an image of something both huge and hidden, and it is perhaps at this point that we should start trying to address the $64 question. What does it all mean? It's pretty amazing, really, that one of the most famous poems in the English language doesn't really seem to mean anything at all. I don't mean by that that it doesn't contain images, pictures we can visualize, just that there doesn't seem to be any thought content, any ideas or concepts underpinning the imagery and driving the poem forward. This, I think, is what Hazlitt and other critics of Coleridge's time found puzzling, frustrating even. There is, as we shall see, a kind of thought process that comes to light in the final lines of the poem, but it's so slight and tenuous that it leaves us grasping frantically for some clue as to what we should make of it. We're going to need to read the poem right through before we can really get to grips with what it might mean, but we can at least pick out some of the elements in these opening lines and think about them. If you've been watching my poetry videos, you'll know I'm very big on noticing contrasting elements within a poem, and that's where I'd like to start with these opening lines. The first images Coleridge gives us are a stately pleasure dome and a sacred river, followed by caverns measureless to man and a sunless sea. Domes are man-made and rise up to the sky, while caverns are natural and underground. The third line, which tells us of the river running through Xanadu, doesn't explicitly mention open countryside beneath the sky, but that surely is how we envisage it, until we're told it runs through caverns to a sunless sea. So there seems to be some kind of contrast being set up here between the man-made artifice of the pleasure dome, which rises up, and the downward flow of the river towards the caverns and the sunless sea. The pleasure dome, being man-made, must have its dimensions, although again this is not stated explicitly, but the caverns are measureless to man, and that sense of vastness is associated with darkness as the river runs through these measureless caverns to a sea that is sunless. It's too early to say what that might add up to, or what it might all mean, but it's worth bearing in mind these contrasting elements to see whether they build up into some kind of pattern as we read further into the poem.